Specifically, one of the primary lessons about leadership that I learned that really translated to the Navy was just focusing on other people's needs when it hurts, when it sucks, when you're tired, when you're miserable, etc. And just really how to be a good teammate. And in being a good teammate, it really sets you up for success to be a good leader. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to lead, people want to know that you care before they're going to care what you have to say or where you're trying to take them.
Put that coffee down.
I'm not here to waste your time, okay? I certainly hope you're not here to waste mine. So I'm going to keep this short.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
Coffee's for closers only.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Behind Your Back podcast with me, Bradley Hartman, founder, CEO of the Behind Your Back sales company, where it's our mission to help you sell more, faster, at higher margins, and have more fun doing it. As for this podcast, we talk about leadership, personal productivity, time management, and the craft of selling in the construction industry. Now, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Capital One Trade Credit. If you are interested in increasing cash flow, driving new revenue, decreasing risk, and leveraging an incredible digital platform to help you run your business easier and to make it easier for your customers to buy from you, you will want to check out Capital One Trade Credit and see if it's a right fit for you. So here's the deal. My guest on this episode is a gentleman named Garrett Moore. And quite frankly, he has one of the most impressive resumes and backgrounds that I have ever seen. Garrett was an all-state athlete and scholar in high school in Arizona, went to Stanford, studied industrial and product design, and played football for the Cardinal. That's right, the singular Cardinal, the one Stanford Cardinal. Had his first internship, as you will hear, at McKinsey & Company. They don't let a whole lot of knuckleheads in there. Graduated from Stanford, went into the Navy, became a U.S. Navy SEAL for over a decade, got his master's degree in cyber electronic operations and warfare in Tel Aviv University. Did he learn the language? Of course he did. He learned Hebrew, professional working Hebrew, and he also knows Italian. Garrett was also an Olmsted Scholar. Don't know what that is? Either did I. It is the military version of the Fulbright or Rhodes Scholarship. Again, they don't give those out to too many people. And what brought him here today and his impressive background over the last 4 years, he's been the CEO and co-founder of Agorus. It's an offsite construction company, more specifically, quote unquote, a software-driven automated technology company that is reinventing construction. Now, if any mere mortal said, yeah, I'm actually using some software to reinvent construction, I'm like, yeah, so am I. Not really. But with this guy, why not? Why would you not want to bet on Garrett Moore? And that's why I'm thrilled to have him on the show to talk to him. We talk about his lessons that he has learned in leadership on the gridiron, as well as a U.S. Navy SEAL. We talk about some of the recent failures and successes in the offsite construction space, including Katerra and Integra. And Garrett talks about how their strategy at Agorus differs from each one of those businesses, but also why he's a fan. We talk about all of that and more. My friends, you are in for a treat. Without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Garrett Moore, CEO and co-founder of Agorus. So, Mr. Garrett Moore, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time on a number of different levels that we'll dig into. But to get us started, let's go over our first 4 questions. Garrett, do you remember the first music album you either purchased or received?
I did. It was a Beach Boys CD.
Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama, Key Largo, Montego, baby, Montego.
And part of the reason I remember it is because I pressed the little plastic thingy in the middle of the disc, and completely shattered the CD, not fully realizing how CDs worked as a kid. And to this day, it stuck with me. And yeah.
Well, that gives me a little bit of context when you say it was your first album when you were a kid and it was a CD. I'm like, all right, you are several years younger than I am. But yes, I remember the first time when you're trying to figure out how this whole thing works. I absolutely. Beach Boys. All right. It's pretty solid. What about the first concert you attended?
There's a little bit of a niche band, kind of indie Christian rock sort of, called Third Day. My dad took me to a concert at a theater out in ASU. I grew up in Arizona. Yeah, it was fantastic. And I remember it very, very fondly, connecting with my dad over it.
Very good. Do you remember the venue?
I would have said it was called like Gambit Theater or Gamage Theater, or there's kind of like a major theater in and around the Tempe area, but it was still like a pretty private, intimate venue. That it was awesome. We were like 40 feet from the stage. It was great.
That's really neat. Garrett, what about your first job, not mowing lawns or, where you were paying taxes to the government for the job?
I'm embarrassed to say this. I was so obsessed with multiple sports in school. My first job was actually not until I was a sophomore in college, and I did an internship at McKinsey doing management consulting. And the funny part is actually that job was highly transformative in my first real job, because I couldn't stand sitting behind a desk crunching Excel files the whole time, which is ultimately what kind of made the pendulum swing to my other job, which is what we'll probably get to in a sec. So we're a little bit late to the tax-paying game.
Well, I don't even know where to go with this. When you say, here's my first job, it was with McKinsey and Company, I'm like, all right, I'm officially out of my league here, but that's pretty exciting. And there's so many folks. I mean, Tom Peters is one of my heroes, and he's a Stanford guy. He's a McKinsey guy. We could go down an entire rabbit hole there, but that's pretty cool. That's pretty astounding.
Better lucky than good, right? I happened to stumble into it. It was summer camp type thing. And so they were doing an internship program, and it was great. I learned a ton. Definitely not what I was looking for at 19 or 20 years old.
Yeah, right. What about your first car?
First car was a green 1993 Camry, and I'm still driving it today. It's a testament to modern manufacturing and tight tolerances, and it's not the prettiest thing, but it still runs and it's working great.
That's incredible. How many miles do you have on it?
Ironically, not that much. I'm probably at like 160. It's actually the way the build quality of those early Camrys was. I mean, everything's heavy. There's no aluminum. It's all steel. It's tremendously well made. There's so few parts on the car. It never broke. So I never had a reason to get something else.
Well, absolutely. And if you get a Camry and you got 160,000 miles, you've used about 20% of its useful life. So, you'll have this for another 15 years for sure.
Absolutely.
I want to jump right in. You'll tell me how you qualify your football success. You were obviously extremely talented. In high school, you played at Stanford. I had a failed college career at Eastern Illinois. And the only insightful thing or thing that helps my story is that I hosted Tony Romo's first recruiting visit there. And so as soon as I saw Stanford football and I kind of looked up the year you were there, you played with Toby Gerhart and Richard Sherman and Doug Baldwin. Let me just start here. Obviously, you were an extremely talented athlete. What leadership lessons did you take from your time playing collegiate football at Stanford?
Well, first I have to counter the narrative that I was talented. I think that's one of the first things I realized when I showed up is I am grossly out of my league. This is imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. So there's quite a few different things. One of the challenges specifically from the football side was I went through 3 coaches in 3 different years. So I got to see 3 very different coaching styles. So Buddy Tevens, then Walt Harris, but the final one was a guy named Jim Harbaugh, which now everybody is kind of familiar with. But I think a lot of it was understanding how to interact with people that come from different walks of life and have different motivations and different goals. And specifically, one of the primary lessons about leadership that I learned that really translated to the Navy was just focusing on other people's needs when it hurts, when it sucks, when you're tired, when you're miserable, et cetera, and just really how to be a good teammate. And in being a good teammate, it really sets you up for success to be a good leader, because at the end of the day, if you're going to lead, people want to know that you care before they're going to care what you have to say or where you're trying to take them. And so I think that kind of grassroots servant leadership was something that didn't really kick in until college and really kind of see it in action.
Wow. There's a lot there. And I think just the way you said, just understanding other people's needs, the sooner you can learn that, but then apply it to whether you're raising funding for VC, you're starting a company, you're serving new customers. We're going to talk about theoretical displacement of craftsmen who've been in this industry for a long time. I think the sooner and more effective that you can understand how other people think, what they care about. You mentioned motivation and goals. So transformative. That's interesting as you kind of think about the three coaches beyond some of what you just described, kind of that grassroots servant leadership and thinking about other people. Were there any other coaching tactics or things that really stood out, either what to do or not to do? Because I can imagine in your role now, you got a growing team, you got different stakeholders. I bet coaching is a lot of what you do now. Any other thing that really you recall grasping onto early while there?
Absolutely. Jim Harbaugh had a thing that I hadn't seen before, and it was, leading from the front is something that everybody knows of. Yeah. But one of the things that stuck out with me is he'd work out with the team. He'd run the wind sprints. He'd knock out all the calisthenics with us. And as a kid, now as an adult, I'm like, okay, yeah, you're fresh. You haven't been doing double days, but like it was highly influential because I'd never seen a coach that would get down and dirty and just jump in alongside you and go through it. And especially for the military, but then even here at the company, it's been huge. So like actually my tool belt is still right there. And I regularly schedule it in to go out and work in the shop. And part of it is about being able to connect with the entire team and make sure I don't get detached from what's going on in the factory floor. But also part of it is you learn so much by just kind of getting out from behind the computer and just being and doing with your team. So that really stuck with me, especially in the military. One of the things I prided myself on, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but it was really, really important for me, was being able to shoot as well and dive as well and jump as well as the rest of my platoon, and really making sure that you never get so removed that you're not willing to get down and dirty. The All Blacks have a thing, and it's a little bit of a tradition. Some people know it because it's famous from the book, but the team captain is the first one to pick up a broom and sweep out the away locker room when a team is leaving. And that idea of like, nobody's too big to pick up a broom, that concept, while in different language, has been really, really important and formative for me all the way through from football to the military to now in a startup.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things there that the New Zealand All Blacks, right? The rugby team. And
yes.
One part is having the captain pick up a broom to sweep not only their own locker room, but the away locker room, right? And I think there's so much is in there. You've talked about your military. What was your decision to make that jump? And because we're not having a 7-hour podcast, which maybe we'll break this up, and some point I would love to get together and ask you more about it. But what was your decision to join the Navy SEALs? You were there for over a decade, 12 plus years. Again, I want to make sure we get back to construction and Agorus and all of that, but maybe just tell me a little bit about, because I think you guys what you guys did, not only emotionally, but physically, from an intellectual standpoint. The Navy SEALs are absolutely fascinating and such an important part of the spine that runs through our military. What made you go down that path? And maybe just give a little context of what are the biggest things that you are still applying today that you learned there?
I'll do you one better. I can actually connect, Stanford football, Navy SEAL, and then now the company actually are three very separate things, but they all led into one another in a way that I would not have foreseen initially. I don't come from a military family. I had no interest in the military. It was not on my radar. I thought I was going to do business or something else. Two major things happened for me. One is, to your point about collegiate football, very quickly you run headlong into the buzzsaw of, I'm not as talented as I think I am, and I can't keep playing beyond this. So like I've hit my ceiling of talent, and I think I hit my ceiling as soon as day one in college, and realizing that while I love team sports, the NFL is not in the cards, period. It's done. Second thing is I lost a friend of mine from high school who committed suicide. He was very, very interested in the military, and it just took me down a road of reflecting on his life. And then those two things combined with time at McKinsey, which was a fantastic opportunity. And I sound so ungrateful for saying this, but I didn't enjoy it. And so I realized that I really enjoy team sports. And so kind of the military popped up as this it's kind of team sports for adults. And so as I started to reflect on that and go, okay, well, if I'm going to do the military, I want to challenge myself. Let's push the envelope. And so I was like, okay, I've heard of special operations, and you start looking around at the different branches, and eventually it sounds so petty and stupid. And I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was like, I like the water. San Diego's a really nice place to live. Let's do that. And so while my reasons were stupid, it got me going down a path where once I eventually started to meet SEALs and understand their brotherhood and their camaraderie, I was hooked. I was addicted. I was like, I've got to do this. And so that's why I ended up actually graduating and leaving school 2 years early to go do it. Cause I was just like, this is now my calling and my passion.
Wow.
Let's graduate, get the diploma and step out. And so put in a package, ended up getting picked up and never looked back. And it was incredible.
You say you're looking for team sports for adults. You joined the Navy SEALs. What do? I go to my local Lifetime gym and join like an over 40 league, like two different paths. That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, I think that competitive spirit and knowing, hey, I can do more, I can be more. And kind of, I imagine there's probably some degree of choose the path that maybe frightens you the most and is going to put you in, a different way that is going to challenge yourself. I can imagine was part of it too, being so competitive.
Absolutely. And I think I remember telling my mom at the time, and she was absolutely beside herself. She was flabbergasted. She's like, what are you doing? This is terrible. And I remember one of the things I told her, and it was pretty prescient, was, Mom, I want to challenge myself and reset my calibration in my bar because I know that this is going to pay huge dividends for anything down the road, whether that's as a husband, as a father, as a future businessman, whatever I do, knowing that I can dig deep and there's more there. That's what I want. And I didn't fully appreciate how much going through buds would suck and et cetera. But like it builds this reservoir that you can tap into. And hands down, buds is not the toughest thing I've ever done by any stretch. Like being a dad with a sick kid, like those things are really, really far harder. But having gone through it, it helped reset when you're a young father and you're raising kids and you're up all night, stuff that everybody's already doing. And when we're starting a company, it really helped put some in context and go, yeah, there's more suffer there. There's more that you can dig deep and really deny yourself and really kind of, again, going back to focus on your wife, focus on your kid, focus on your company, not on your suffering, your sleep, your whatever.
Yeah. Was there something that happened to you that said, I need to reset this bar for myself?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think maybe a certain amount of sadism of just like, every time you want to look for another challenge and look for another kind of way to dig deep, but there wasn't anything specifically about football that said I need to try or I need to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, maybe it's just more of there's always another mountain to climb. There's always something else, and I got to do it because it's there. So you're with the Navy SEALs for going on 12 years. You mentioned kind of before your tool belt. Where along your journey did you have the skills or the competence to put on a tool belt, and how did this lead you into this opportunity in home building and Agorus?
I would argue that I still am looking for that skill and competence to effectively run and grow a company. But I think it was, so by my third deployment, I'm now 3 kids deep and we're like, okay, we need to buy a house. So we bought a house and through the process ended up realizing that we kind of became an accidental developer because they missurveyed the land. There was 2 lots worth of land. So we said, hey, it's San Diego, California. Let's tear the house down and build 2 houses. Naively, foolishly thinking, oh, if you're a mechanical engineer in school, therefore you can figure out construction. But it was kind of that perhaps overconfidence or hubris that kind of led into, let's just figure this out. Well, as you go through that, you kind of stumble headlong into the buzzsaw of construction and just kind of the culture and some of the challenges. And then I remember vividly 2 different deployments because the build spanned multiple deployments, trying to track down subcontractors while my wife's dealing with 2 kids and an infant. And we're just like, hey, it's Tuesday. Why is nobody at the job site? And so it was through that experience combined with kind of, there's an intersection where the wear and tear of the job, having kids at home, having a family starts to add up. And then seeing this new problem and a new opportunity, that intersection was what kind of caused me to take an all stop and say, okay, do I have the requisite skills? Is there a passion there? Is this a problem that can be solved? And all of those combined at the same time that my co-founder was going through a very similar experience. We're childhood friends, known each other our entire lives. Okay. He's actually my next door neighbor. And we're going through this process together because he's building his house traditionally. I'm building my house offsite through modules. And we're just like coming back to the same conclusion of this is a problem that we could solve, or we believe we could solve. So I guess it remains to be seen. And this is a problem that's worth leaving the military and the brotherhood for. And I think one of the other components was we're living in this like highly interconnected platoon team culture where everybody's covering each other's back and taking care of each other. And then you come home and you're looking at a job site where it's a lot of trade warfare and finger pointing. And you're just like, wait, what's going on? There's a disconnect here. And so we thought, well, if nothing else, obviously there's technology to play and we'll talk about that. But like, if nothing else, if we could import and take special operations SEAL team culture and slap it at a job site, it would have to be improved, even without throwing in the technology.
Yeah, I love that phrase, trade warfare. Lived it for a long time. But I think hearing that from you is significantly more powerful, and like understanding some of these dynamics that really, are at war, that really cause struggle on our job sites. Couldn't agree more. Here's, maybe you can put your finger on this for me just a little bit more specifically. Whenever I see successful entrepreneurs or people who are really passionate and they're driving headlong into something, there's always an earned insight where you're saying, okay, I've done this and I have earned this insight that other people don't have. Or maybe they know of it, but they haven't lived it. It's not in their pores like it is for me. What is that? Is there a singular or maybe kind of a pair of earned insights that you guys have learned kind of doing it the hard way that really underpin Agorus?
I think one is how painful the home building process is at a personal level. So at an abstract business, we can talk about carrying costs and project overruns, et cetera, but then being on the receiving side of that as a homeowner and a family, just getting drug along. There were multiple occasions where I wanted to quit, like, forget it. I'm done with this project. I know that this would be a blessing if I could see it through, but I'm out. I'm over this. Thankfully, I didn't tap out and didn't quit, but like that personal pain of feeling like you're being taken advantage of, intrinsically or intrinsically, by just the nature of the system. So that was pain point, earned insight number one. And earned insight number two was a realization that offsite construction should be far more beneficial and advantageous than it was. I live in that house now. It's modular, and I understand why it hasn't penetrated the mainstream yet, because it's not meeting the pain points that customers and developers need. So I think those two form the core rock of what keeps us going and why this is so personal for us.
Got it. What is missing when you say, hey, I understand why offsite construction, some of the successes that you've had in the past and what you're building Agorus on, I can understand what's missing. What is that?
I'm going to get on my soapbox here and kind of give my stump speech or my theory a little bit. And it's this: prefabrication and offsite construction is not new. Sears catalog, people have been doing it for a really, really long time. My theory, and I'll keep this as a theory because only time will tell if it's proven, is that there's something inherent to the American psyche that says, I want to live in a structure that is custom or looks like a home. If in fact Americans were completely comfortable with IKEA style houses where we all lived in a row, Soviet era housing style, and it was all the exact same, prefabrication would absolutely dominate. However, I don't see that in America. And so one of the things Kyle and I did when we traveled around and we saw other countries and saw why prefabrication has maybe made inroads in other economies. And a large part of it is the American psyche. So we said, okay, well, I know, whatever it is, Tesla and Toyota have a new car coming off their plant like every 54 and a half seconds. I know manufacturing can do it. Technologically, it's there. What's missing? And our theory was, okay, if you have a customer and a society that's demanding essentially customization, but you're looking for production-like efficiencies, the only way that you can connect those two is through software. And so our insight is that nobody's ever built and designed a construction software that can take the custom and the abstract and turn it into the concrete and the standardized. And so the analogy I use, as cheesy as it is, because I'm a nerd at heart, is the Death Star in a Lego format is just a series of standard bricks. You got 6 by black, 4 by gray, etc.
Yeah.
But if you could take a software that says, here's a picture of the Death Star, and all of a sudden break it down and then tell you what to fabricate, then you can just put all those pieces together. And so that software is the core insight or the core uniqueness that we believe we've done that nobody ever has before, that allows you to have both customization and production at the same time.
Yeah, that idea of kind of mass customization. And I joined Pulte Homes out of school in 2000. And at that point, they were talking about this Pulte building systems. They had acquired another company. They were doing offsite. We were seeing videos of them literally assembling a house in 4 hours. And we were like, this is the future, and the future's here. And I remember talking to, an old grizzled vet who'd been around home building for 40 years. And he was like, hey, I got news for you. This ain't new. He's like, you go to Europe, it's in other places. He's like, it just hasn't worked here. It'll probably work in 5 to 10 years. Well, needless to say, come 2005, come 2010, it's not. But I also think you get enough smart people and enough money, private or venture, et cetera, things are going to move. And that's what I see happening now. I'm interested to ask you maybe what you have learned from other unsuccessful or successful offsite construction companies. And I'm going to ask you later to kind of maybe identify some of the ways you're different, because I think for people who don't know too much, the Kateras and the Integras and the Agorus, we can put them all in the same bucket when I know there are very significant differences. But for now, let's look at Katera. Obviously, got a ton of publicity. Anytime a venture fund dumps in $200 million into a company twice in the same year, it's going to raise some headlines, whether it succeeds or fails. When you look at Katera, are there things you said, okay, hey, we can learn from that, and that's going to help us move faster in the future?
Absolutely. In fact, a handful of our team are actually from Katera, and part of that process has been unpacking what went wrong, et cetera. Before I get on my high horse, Katera did a lot of things right, but there were some fatal flaws. So I think in summation, the biggest thing was trying to boil the ocean. And so when you start raising that much capital and you've got SoftBank putting multiple billions of dollars as tailwinds, in order to justify raising that capital, you have to get really, really ambitious. The problem is for any new company, and this is probably our core thesis, is focus will win the day. And so as an example for Katera, if you're getting into prefabricated concrete plants in India, affordable housing in Saudi Arabia, heavy timber up in the Pacific Northwest, at the same time you're buying residential contractors, you're trying to build your own HVAC systems, like who you are as a company, your core identity, your core product gets diffused and lost. And so when you're hiring thousands of employees a year, it's so difficult to keep your culture and your focus, et cetera, that I think they just lacked strong, focused leadership up at the top. And I guess the art of saying no. And I don't pretend to be great at that, but it's something that we're trying to learn of. In order to make a successful startup, you got to say no a lot.
Mm-hmm. I love the phrase, boil the ocean. What do you mean by that?
If you look at construction, construction's a big term. Let's just say even residential construction in the US, multiple hundreds of billions of dollars as an industry. That is an ocean. As a frame of reference, you could add 500,000 homes worth of capacity to the United States, and you're still probably not getting us back onto track to where our country needs to be. So the size of this market is so large. If you try and boil that all at the same time, you're not going to do it. So you have to find out your slice. Is it a geographic slice? Is it a targeted vertical? And I think what Katera probably realized at the very end, their core product that they would have absolutely crushed on was this 24-unit kind of garden-style apartment building, 3 stories. They just started to crack the nut right when they went bankrupt. If that had been their sole focus from the get-go, I think they would have absolutely dominated.
Yeah, we'll flip it. I don't know enough about Integra. All I do know is I think whatever the marketing and branding and social media and getting their message out war is, whatever that is, I think they're doing that well. I don't have enough context to know if they're winning any other ways, but I just, from what I see online and basically where I am as a passionate construction dude with building and the supply side of it, their messages around, are there other things there? And maybe I'll ask you a 2-part question, because that's what bad podcast hosts do. They ask 2 questions at the same time to their guests. Part of it is maybe, what do you see them doing right? But also maybe let's kind of lead into this little bit of a differentiation of, what you guys maybe do differently there. And I'm assuming you've already talked about some kind of being the software niche, but I'll tee that up for you. As you think about Integra, what do you see?
I'm a huge fan. I'm pretty bullish on Integra. If I had to back a horse in this race, well, 2 things. First is this industry could support 10 Kateras, 10 Integras. It's so large. So I bristle at people talking about competitors because I think it underscores like how much we need to move the needle. So these are allies in the fight against the status quo, if I can be so bold. Yeah. And so there's no like zero-sum nature. So I really am hugely supportive. There are certain business models I don't agree with as much, but Integra would be one of the ones that I believe they will last. And I think they've done a really good job. I think their specific niche is we are going to be a production framer, and we're going to do it really, really well in the Northern California area. We've got a background together. We've got I think Louisiana Pacific is their dominant owners. I think they own basically most of the company. And I think they've got a focus and a niche, and I think they're going to do that very, very well. So I'm a huge fan. I think from a differentiation perspective, there's kind of a couple things. One is the software. And so that ability to customize at volume. The second one is a slightly different business model. So Katera's plant out in Central California, very, very large, very capitally intensive, and highly centralized. Okay. We've decided to take the absolute opposite approach, which is very lean, very capitally light, and decentralized. So our facility is probably a 15th the size of theirs. But our theory is if I could take 15 of these, I can now get our capability in our manufacturing closer to the areas of construction. And so when we look at the US market, 5 kind of dominant areas account for half of US residential construction. It's California, Phoenix, Tucson, kind of the Tri-City, Texas area, Florida, and then kind of North Carolina, South Carolina, Atlanta, Nashville. So like if you put a plant and said, I'm going to draw a 200-mile ring, 250-mile ring, you can cover the vast majority of the US's construction with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plants. So business model wise, we built our machinery, we built our software and all of our patents around the idea that we need to put our manufacturing closer to where construction is happening. The third insight is that we believe just framing better is not going to move the needle for construction. And so our approach is everything from slab to sheetrock is our goal. And the theory behind this is that people want to customize their paint colors, their cabinets, their countertops, their lighting fixtures, but nobody cares what goes behind the wall. Nobody is asking for 2x5 studs or circular studs or 15 gauge Romex. People are asking for customization in the layout and the things that they can touch. So from a manufacturing perspective, if we stay mercilessly focused on things that are standardized and things that people don't care about inside of the shell, that's where we can add the most value. And I think that's where the highest labor cost and highest labor shortages are.
I love that. I was looking at your 3-phase model, the digitization, the construction, and the installation. Maybe this is a dumb question based on kind of what you shared on the software. Which one of those, and maybe the changes to the status quo, do you think is most transformative?
I think it's the digitization.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it leverages computers to do what computers are really, really good at, which is to calculate and crunch numbers and find tolerances. And so one of the things that's most exciting to us is when we have a new customer and they're just like, there's no way you can build that accurately offsite. And then the panels show up and they just thunk, they fit right in together because we manufacture to a 16th of an inch tolerance. That stickiness for them of, oh, wow, that is more accurate. That is faster. And so I think the digitization makes manufacturing and makes installation easy because the computers and technology have done the heavy lifting. At the end of the day, machines are dumb. You tell them where to put nails, you tell them how to cut the boards, they're going to do it exactly the same every time. And then when you get to the job site for the installation, and this is kind of getting more into the socioeconomics of the business, which is we have a labor force where I was just reading a study in one of the states, 70% of the electricians in that state are above 50, 1% are below the age of 30. There's this proverbial mouse that's working its way through the snake, and there is not an influx of under 30-year-olds entering the trades, and that's going to get worse before it gets better. And so we look at this as a way to kind of change the installation dynamics and say, you don't need to be highly talented. We need people that are motivated to work in a cross-functional team and focus on installing rather than building. And that way we can leverage the workforce that exists, perhaps get them motivated about a new system and a new technology, but then you can be building homes in days, not weeks and months.
Yeah. Have you guys been able to do that successfully or have conversations? Just as I look at this industry, and it's the framers, it's a lot of the salespeople at lumber building material dealers. It's we have a generational challenge of getting folks in. However, meet a lot of people who are in their 50s who are still extremely passionate about the industry and are open to learning new things. And I had a guy just recently, State College, PA, who was talking about, he's got this 23-year-old he's working with, and he's teaching him all about the lumber building material construction industry. And he's like, what he's teaching me about how this phone works and how Excel works, and explained to me in a very rudimentary way what artificial intelligence is. He's like, this pumps me up. So I think there are those people. How have you been able to kind of bring them into your discussion, to bring them over to your view of the future at Agorus?
2 things are especially sticky. One is just walking a job site and watching a really complex high-end custom home get stood up and built, essentially, even though it's built off-site, get built in hours. And they're like, it's like a paradigm shift where they're like, I just drove by, it was a slab this morning, and now there's a house. Like it's sticky. So it's like, I can't reject that. Yeah. The second thing that's also helpful is when you fully digitized a home, we'll bring customers, developers, framers, whoever it is, into our shop. and put them in virtual reality and let them walk around the house, and they'll get to see exactly how it's getting built. It's not a render. That's the drafting file. That's the same file that's on the shop floor. And so as they start to look at it and be able to visualize and see some of these tools that perhaps a 25-year-old takes for granted, and you start bringing those in and saying, hey, here's your iPad, take this augmented reality out to the job site and you can walk around and see what the house is going to look like. Those interactions, those being able to see the future helps them understand, because when you just look at the raw supply or the panels, it just looks like timber. It looks like any other home because we're not using different materials. But when you connect these dots for them and show them what technology can do for their process and speed, it helps kind of the stickiness to that.
Yeah. So I'll throw this at you. This was a very recent conversation. This happened 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Two things are true. One is they will look at this offsite and they'll say, well, there's been offsite going on for a long time and it continues to fail. Every 5 or 10 years, there's this new offsite push and it always fails. I believe this to be true because I've been in the business for 30 years. And yet, as a lumber building material salesman, what I do as part of my job, because it's our responsibility if we build the trusses wrong, I, in sales, sending wood products, have to go measure the foundation. Now, being someone who built, over 1,000 homes, I was proud of what I did, and I learned it was very different being in that production setting. The idea that the concrete guys can do whatever they want and it just falls on other people's shoulders makes me want to put my head through drywall. It drives me absolutely insane. And when I hear salespeople who have to go measure the foundation, anyway, my soapbox. For this individual that holds both these things to be true, it makes sense that because I'm delivering trusses, and if they're wrong, it's my responsibility. I got to measure the foundation. And yet, I don't think the time is right for offsite. How would you speak to that individual?
So there's a lot to unpack there. And when we look at competition in general, that mindset, I genuinely call it trauma or PTSD, because people that have lived through multiple cycles of prefabrication, it's the siren song. Like, okay, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 37 times over my career, shame on me. Like, I've touched that and I've been burned.
Yeah.
That is my biggest hurdle, and my biggest challenge is convincing them of that. One of the biggest things that we have going for us, and a lot of, like I said earlier, better lucky than good. I don't pretend to be the sharpest tool in the shed. One of the things that I feel like is really good right now is the timing. You know the stats as well as I do. 5.5 million homes underwater cumulatively built up over the last decade, a declining labor force, and all of a sudden this delta is getting bigger and bigger. Housing prices are going up. It's not going to get better anytime soon without a technology advance. And so because there is such an acute labor shortage, especially with costs of labor going up as well, I think the old guard's receptiveness to a new technology is especially ripe, because right now, ask any of them, they'll say, A, I can't get good labor, and B, the labor that I do get is, you can't use the word craftsman anymore. It's basically unskilled that I'm trying to teach. And we all know, like, some of these things take years to teach. So that, I think, has created a bit of receptiveness. It's not like they're sitting flush with rock star framing, electrical, plumbing talent in most locations.
Yeah, that's spot on. I'm watching the time here and really enjoyed this. I do want to ask you before I let you go, I think you guys do a really nice job on your website that I'll make sure we make really clear and how everyone can learn more about you guys. But you kind of have this traditional Agorus, pre-construction and construction, where you're just kind of seeing it's really visually, it's very easy to understand. And one of them was kind of the traditional way was floating material cost estimate. And then with Agorus, fixed material cost estimate. I'm fascinated to learn with the pricing and commodity volatility we've seen kind of over the past 2 years. How do you guys do that?
So there's a couple of facets to it. One is we don't bid. Again, going back to the digitization, we built an algorithm and a custom software that says, give us these data inputs about the project. Yep. And it's a price. There's no like, I'm going to mark it up, I'm going to mark it down. It's fixed. We have not rolled it out onto the website yet, but here probably in the next quarter or two, we are going to make real-time pricing live on the website so people can pressure test it and understand what's going on. And again, the goal here is to create a at-market price that has a well above market value in terms of the value proposition to customers. This is not designed to be a super expensive product that people can't afford. It's designed to just meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Now, because the vast majority of our customers are kind of mid to larger size developers, one of the things that we can do to reduce the volatility, because it's all over the place right now, is starting to get into relationship and kind of long-term based thinking with customers that says, okay, if you want to jump into the prefabrication world, let's do this together. And when you connect your long-term interest with our long-term interest in customer partnership, then we can go back upstream to the mills and say, we're going to lock in price. And so while there's not, to my knowledge, a robust lumber's futures market in place yet, we can essentially create our own internal futures market for customers by just committing and connecting dots. And because our mills understand that we're a high volume buyer, we can just it's a relationship. It's just basically saying, hey, we're going to be all in this together, and let's set that price and just kind of stick with it. And so that provides a lot of value, because developers hate selling a home to a customer and then marking it up $40,000 because all of a sudden lumber went through the roof.
Right. Yeah. And to point out the obvious, when you are building a home in 3 to 5 days, that cycle time, it's less than a week, as opposed to, hey, we've got a 100-day build cycle. And then, right, there's some pre-construction and then, right, the closing. So you're simplifying that. So you're narrowing that window, obviously, as well.
Absolutely. And I oftentimes will lose credibility when I start talking about building homes in days. I have to add some context. There's a great case study out there. NVR used to be a company called Ryan Homes, as I'm sure you probably know. Ryan Homes was building homes in 14 days in the 70s without technology. Grading slab all the way to keys in hand. So it can be done. Now, it requires offsite construction. It requires a tight process, et cetera.
Sure.
But most of the time when I say that, people are like, you're completely lost and you're delusional if you think you can be helping builders build homes in under 30 days. And I say, I understand. However, it's already been done, and they made a killer business off of it. Now, they lost some focus and bought the Pirates and, et cetera. There were other facets in play, but it can be done. And it's an indictment against us as a society that we don't demand that level of speed and precision that we would from a phone maker, an automaker, an airplane maker, et cetera. We just have kind of written off construction and say, it's okay to take 180 days to build a home.
Yeah. Well, too, and obviously that's part of that is displaced, but I think with your software, you know this better than me. I'd love to talk about it maybe sometime in a part 2, but this just in time of, I don't need to go, buy all this material and have it sitting out here. If we're getting it through the system faster, we're more efficient, we're more thoughtful with it, right? Less variability. We can speed that process as well.
Absolutely.
Last question here. I love sales. I want to make sure I don't bury the lead. I want to know, how do you guys land new customers?
We don't have a sales team. Oftentimes it's been word of mouth, and it's that stickiness that you said of, oh, I was driving by yesterday. That was a slab. Now there's a house. What is going on? Hey, I got to find out what's happening here. And I think because construction is, in many ways, it's a tight-knit community, and everybody kind of knows everybody, and they're all working for each other and kind of, trading labor, et cetera. Word tends to get around. So from a grassroots perspective, we've gotten great feedback. And I think while I perhaps have portrayed construction with this really broad brush, there are a ton of forward-leaning innovators and early adopters in the business at all levels that are looking for that next thing to help unlock. I'm building the same way I was 120 years ago. I want to be better. I just need a partner in that. And so when they come across Agorus and they see somebody that's like-minded and passionate about pushing the ball forward, there's instant alignment. And so you kind of almost magnetically kind of tend to attract other like-minded construction technologists.
Got it. Garrett, before I let you go, I want to make it really obvious. I always want to have the sales methodology. I want to call to action. So this is the point where you've been very self-deprecating about your football career, about the Navy SEALs, about a whole bunch of things. I'm fascinated with what you're doing. I'm a fan of you, and I'm a fan of what you guys are doing. So I'm rooting for you guys. I want to make sure you guys are making it really clear. So kind of lose all that, be really direct with our audience here. Where can they learn more about you? And if they're interested, what next steps should they take?
Awesome. So easiest things are LinkedIn and website, because that's what everybody's already using to connect with us. To be fully transparent, we are growing and we're hiring. And so we are looking for rockstar like-minded construction technologists that are passionate about this and want to join a team that's obsessed with the mission of changing how the world builds. So that's on the talent side. On the customer and sales side, we're, again, same kind of thing. We're looking for builders, usually at the kind of like regional and above size. We're tapped out on capacity right now to take kind of custom one-offs anymore, but we're looking for builders that are passionate about pipelining this in and going to an offsite construction system. And then the last one is just connecting with other folks in the industry. And it could be material partners, it could be technology partners, et cetera. One of our company mottos is, it takes a village. We can't do this alone. We're going to do this through partnerships. We're going to do this by honey, not vinegar. We're not going to try and bully our way through the industry or come across condescending. Like, we know that we don't know, but we're eager to learn. And it's like you said at the start, strong views loosely held. We are really passionate about offsite construction and improving this industry. How we get there is we're going to evolve and we're going to innovate. So for people that have that same mindset, love to connect and continue networking and just kind of sharing lessons learned. Like I said, rising tide floats all boats. This is not a zero-sum game.
Got it. Well, I think this is a sign that I need to do better on podcast hosting, but Agorus, right? I had to look it up here. What does it mean? Because I think that really ties in really nicely, I think both as a way to end this episode, but on what you just kind of said with it takes a village.
At its start, USPTO it's really tough to trademark something these days and kind of carve out like your brand.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a part of it. The second aspect is we're really passionate about this idea that it's home. We are a residential based technology, and the idea that home ownership is becoming increasingly difficult for people to attain, but that's the center of life. And so it was a derivative of the Greek word agora, which was the central marketplace, the meeting place where the free people come together and share ideas. And so the home is essentially that for all of us. And so it was kind of an agora plus us kind of put together with a little bit of a classical nod, but also a kind of a touch of, hey, we're trying to be a tech tool to kind of connect the old school, which is a home, with the new school of how it can be built better, faster, cheaper.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I appreciate you here. I'm excited for what you guys are doing. And somewhere soon, I would love it if going to San Diego any time of the year is kind of something that I should do more of. But I'd love to kind of do a round 2 with you. There's so many things that I kind of was like, I can't ask that, otherwise we're going to go down a rabbit hole. But anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'd love that. Happy to come on any other time.
All right then, friends. How did that go? I didn't oversell it, did I? No, I don't think I did. I've listened to this thing 3 times, and I'm excited. I'm gonna make a trip unannounced. I'm going to San Diego. I want to check this out. I don't know. I want to learn more from Garrett Moore. I'm excited to see about what he does and his team for the construction industry. Now, our goal here is to make this the best podcast you listen to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas for future shows, potential guests, or any sales fundamentals issues that you are struggling with. Do not hesitate to email me directly at bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. Again, bradley@behindyourbacksales.com. You can also feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn and connect on Instagram at BehindYourBackCEO. And if you did find this episode valuable, please share it with your network and leave a review. Those mean more to us than you know. And to find out more about Mr. Garrett Moore, do not hesitate to hit him up on LinkedIn and check out his company's site. It's Agorus, AGORUS.com. Again, Agorus, AGORUS.com. I want to again thank you, our presenting sponsor, Capital One Trade Credit. If you are interested in growing revenue, increasing cash flow, while decreasing risk and leveraging an incredibly powerful digital platform as your own, you should check out Capital One Trade Credit. How should you do that? Google Capital One Trade Credit and see if it's a fit for you. And with that, my friend, we are going to close out like we always do with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.